to see your face and mute your microphones, please. We are recording this and we'll be posting it online. So just for your information. Yeah, chat will be monitored. Feel free to add in notes, comments. It'll be live and awake. And if you're having any issues with tech or just any kind of issues, we're going to be using a few technology here. Give me a ping on Zoom, Slack, wherever. Yeah, and without further ado, let's let Tracy take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Hennessy. I am one of the co-organizers of Kick-Ass PM, and I'm the head of delivery at an agency in Austin called Handsome. I'm really excited about the fact that we're getting to collaborate like this because I think one of the reasons why we started Kick-Ass PM was about having the opportunity to build community with other like-minded folks, because so many people on project teams and everything like that sometimes misses out on that chance to really bond with people that think about things and go through some of those same shared experiences. So I'm always really excited about moments like these where we get to meet and extend our reach beyond just the Austin area. So really happy to be partnering. And so we're going to continue to do some scattered remote events for the rest of the year. So if you're interested, not in Austin, but want to join remotely, keep an eye on us. You can join our meetup group. You can follow us on Twitter. We'll post about events and things like that as they come up over the next few months. But yeah, and if you ever find yourself in Austin and things start to go back to in real life, face to face, we'd be happy to have you. So yeah, thanks to Rachel and the whole team for including us today.
Awesome. All right, next slide. So our main sponsor is Run. They're our second year. They're a Vancouver and New Zealand-based company. They're a software for project managers made by project managers. So they are thinking about all those little things that we keep track of. You can navigate planning, tracking, forecasting in real time. And they have just revamped their people planner so you can create a new project type for your internal work, because that is definitely a thing now in COVID season, as well as adding weekends to your timesheet. There's something for everyone, and you can customize it to what your needs are in their 14-day free trial without a credit card, because having to do that is really annoying. Our second sponsor is Louder Than 10. They're here to improve the lives of digital workers by helping people make their organizations more profitable, sustainable, and democratic. They do this by providing in-depth training and coaching in a more humane and ethical in a more ethical approach. And so they have an apprenticeship program that turns designers, developers, and coordinators into strategic mid-level PMs. We're generating a lot more revenue for their companies and opening new positions for under and misrepresented people in tech. So today they actually have a special discount for people who are at this event. They have a spot set aside for their apprenticeship that is just starting next Tuesday, which is 30% off. So you can contact Rachel directly for that. There's no limits. You can be anywhere in the world. It's a 3 to 5 hour per week commitment for 8 months. And people are earning anywhere between 80 to 200K within the year. So you see that return on investment pretty quick. And there's a few people on our team that definitely want to do it. Next slide. So we have a Slack group. We have 750 people. We talk a lot about PM stuff. We post events. A lot of them have been Vancouver, Canada based, but I think that's all changing. Tools, jobs, bookshelves to join us. Yeah, next slide. So Digital Vancouver PM has been around for 7 years. It is completely volunteer run. And so these are some of our volunteers. We usually have an event once a month, and the rest of our programming is kind of online and on Slack. So join us on Meetup to keep noted on what's happening there. Next slide. So we do have a code of conduct. We want this place to be very, very safe, fun, and a great experience, regardless of who you are and where you're coming from and what your experience is. We don't tolerate harassment of participants, of our speakers, or our volunteers. So definitely let us know if there are things that make you feel uncomfortable, and we are constantly trying to improve our events. We are PMs after all, so let us know. And yeah, without much further ado, let's get into our agenda. So we're at the end of intros and housekeeping. Hopefully everyone who wants to come will be here. We're closing our workshop pretty soon. Rachel has a fully jam-packed agenda. It is going to be great. And we will wrap up and depart by 6:15, 7-ish. Definitely know it's going to be late for a lot of you in the East Coast. So thank you for your time, everyone. And I will transfer it on to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see your faces. I'm so excited to see some familiar faces and also to see some new ones. It's been a little while since I was able to partner with the Kick-Ass PM group, and so it's just really great to be back. And I cannot believe that 7 years have gone by. So I'm pretty much floored. And here we are, all here together, and this is gonna get real. So here we go. Just doing a check. Can you all see everything in front of you? Everything's looking good? All righty. Thanks so much. Okay, so I'm gonna expand so I can see all your lovely faces and put you in camera B. All right, so we are talking about benchmarking 101. A lot of this is about projects, process, and people health. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Gertz. I'm the CEO of Louder Than 10. Ritika did a great introduction there. I really appreciate you, Ritika. And you can reach me at Stray Muse or on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure that you can access this information after the talk. So I've been doing this work for about 11 years. I started out as a digital PM, and I have been running our own company, Louder Than 10, for 11 years. Worked with and trained over 100 product companies, agencies, departments that are in film, software, news, marketing, and design. And we've definitely kind of carved out a little bit of a niche because we care a lot about systems and democracy at work. So our whole thing is we're actually moving towards a worker-owned co-op. My business partner and husband, he's actually in the co-op boot camp right now. So he might just be popping in to say hi, but he might also be in the boot camp. And the funny part, maybe not so funny, is that there are times that I do dream that my cat is a spreadsheet. The cat is literally an object that I need to move. The values aren't adding up. And whether he's sleeping beside me or not, I have to figure out how to move him into the right place. So I think that might either be a really sad thing, or it might be just showing you how dedicated I am to project management and the life cycle. I just really care about people, process, and getting things done. So here's what we're going to do today, folks. We're going to dive into, we just did intros, so we're good, we're done. We're going to dive into project, process, people, health, and we're just going to talk about what that means and how you can translate that for your own organization. We're going to cover tips for healthier projects, process, and people so that you actually have a way to look at your own systems. And then we're going to deep dive into an exercise where you can just check and see how healthy do you think you are. From there, we're going to do a little bit of a breakout where you're going to get a chance to actually improve your organizational health in small groups. So you're going to be able to talk through some of the pain points that you're experiencing. I'm going to definitely check in just with the energy in the room because that'll be pushing 10 for some of you folks, or closer to it, I should say. And finishing up with a short Q&A so that you folks have a chance to just ask any questions that are still lingering on your mind. So let's dig in, shall we? First of all, I know that you're all thinking this. It's almost belaboring the point. It's been a bit of a weird year, right? So I want to summarize. This is what I think has happened. This is what's happened in my life. I don't know about you all, but this is what's happening. We're 8 months into quarantine, right? So we still know that there's a death toll still climbing. There's no vaccines. There's reinfections. That's gross. There's an overnight change from working in an office or a hybrid mode to now all of a sudden working from home, right? Within a week or two, people were transitioning into homemade office spaces, and some of you are still working out of your bed. Parents are sending kids back to school and online, and there's like probably less internet connections than there are rooms to sit in, right? Homes are being filled with people trying to work on the internet all at the same time. We traded in that 2-hour commute for 2 hours more work, right? And we gave up vacations, friend hangouts, and big group events because, well, we had to. There was no choice. I remember back in March and April, and I had a good chance to hang out with some of these fine folks here. It was about a month of Zoom hangouts where everyone was like, yeah, like, let's stay in touch. Let's cook meals together. Remember that? We were like cooking meals and making bread and like playing games online. Then everybody was like, this is bullshit. I'm so tired. I am not doing this anymore. So that stopped. And then summer was like, bye. And now we're like, oh man. So in addition to this, right, we have 50 working days until December holidays kick in. Surprise. It's a fun news. But you know what? You're still here. You're showing up. You're grinding it out. And in fact, many of you folks are probably actually more productive while others are hitting a wall. And we're going to dig into some of this and what it all means. Some owners are telling me that they're concerned about their teams burning out right now. There are real silos happening where communicating online is taking a huge toll, even if it is asynchronously, right? So in the midst of this chaos, right? This chaos that we could not have predicted, this thing that we cannot plan for, everything that we were set up to do in our lives to try to manage chaos has been tossed out the window. So what do you look at in terms of project health, process health, and people health when everything you know is upside down? How do you know if you're doing okay? How do you know if you should keep going? Or how do you know if maybe you're being taken advantage of as a worker in your organization? We're going to dive in and show you a little bit more about how all those things tie together. I think one of the weird things I started realizing is that there is a big theme here that we cannot let our cups overflow. Usually an overfilling cup is like a sign of, you know, we're doing great. Like, look at all this extra juice. I love it. But in this case, we only have a cup of a certain size. This is mine right now. And if you keep pouring something in it, it's going to overflow and I'm not going to have anything else left to give you. So you're going to find that this theme comes up because when we look at it, I don't want to put any of you in boxes, but we literally live our world in boxes of time. So we're going to use that to be able to look at what healthy is and what unhealthy is. So let's focus a little bit more on projects, process, and people. First of all, what the heck does healthy even mean? Like when you think about health for your process, your projects, and your people, do you have meanings to those words? You think, oh, on budget, on time, within scope. That's the classic PM triangle, right? But the reality is there's a whole bunch more depth. So what we did is, because we were really concerned about how folks were doing, back in May, when it was like the initial shock had kind of worn off and everyone was just reeling. We were like, we didn't even know if we didn't know if it was like, can you wear a mask? Should you wear a mask? We didn't know if you should stand in a grocery line. We didn't know if, you know, you could lick a frozen food bag and be okay or not, right? A lot of stuff was up in the air. So we wanted to see how organizations, specifically digital service companies, were doing. I don't know what the breakdown here is in the audience. So I'm going to reference both data for digital project managers working in client service, but I'm also going to pull this into, if you're working in an internal department or product companies, there are things that you want to be looking at and thinking about here. So what we did is we gathered a whole bunch of data. We actually managed to get 84 different responses from folks all over the world. Most of these were owners, and the majority of these folks there were some very interesting patterns that kind of boiled down to whether they had a optimistic or pessimistic outlook on the future and how they thought they would do in Q3 and Q4. So first of all, let's talk about how project health shapes up. So what we recognized was that in the first quarter, so what is it, March, when lockdown started, I think folks had, you know, I had just gotten off the plane from Mexico and I was just like, whoa, what's going on? We're all just stuck at home here. And from our data, the folks that reported said that 81% had experienced project cancellations. So it would be really interesting. I know half of you folks are like eating dinner and you don't have to turn your video on if you don't want me to see you, but just a show of hands, like how many of you folks have experienced some sort of project cancellation? Okay, so of the folks that are, I think that's almost everybody that is here, that is invisible. not invisible, that is visible. So yeah, that's a big number of cancellations. So in terms of this was not overly surprising, but I think what we want to find out, and we weren't able to get this data because this was just initial Q2 data, not Q3, Q4, would be how many people are experiencing cancellations this quarter. So if I could actually get just a rough look from the group here, how many of you are experiencing any cancellations this quarter? So that means basically we started in what, October? So Q4, have you experienced any cancellations? One. Wow. Okay. So the initial shock has worn off, right? So we're starting to see there was that rebound effect. And one of the things that you folks want to think about here is that, okay, so when you're a client service industry, or when you are a client service company, your clients are going to experience those things first. They're going to feel it before you feel it. You're going to probably feel it 6 to 8 months later. As we say, it's not my wise words, but one of our fantastic financial consultants in the past said, expect to see, it takes 6 to 8 months for anything that you do today or for anything that happens today to show up and reverberate on your books. So that fallout is not done yet, right? It's still going to happen. For those of you folks who are internal or product facing, you probably have already experienced the majority of what this particular situation is going to do to you. Now, it's not done because there is still stimulus packages. There are still, changes happening within government and within health systems. And frankly, COVID hasn't gone away. So expect that there will be additional changes here. So that's the data I'd like to pull. But in terms of getting a benchmark, these are the things that we started to pull from. So how many folks here have heard that you should be allocating approximately 20 to 30% of your budget towards your project management costs? But just quick show of hands if that's a common number for you. Okay. So this is the goal. This is where we should be aiming. And I'm going to show you why in a minute here. And we're going to dig into this. But let's actually see what the actual allocations are. From my research and from discussing with a lot of folks, they're allocating between 10 to 15% for their projects. So if your projects are running over because of delays or you're being impacted by COVID and say your stakeholders are recalibrating, then you potentially are going to be hit really hard by overages if your numbers are sitting on this lower side versus this higher side up here. So that's the first little bit of information. If you're not currently allocating, doesn't matter if you're client facing or internal, you should still be thinking about the amount of time it takes to set up and run the damn project. And it takes a lot more time than you think it does. We'll come back to that in a second. So those of you who are client service shops, again, I'm just favoring you here because this is where our data centered. The benchmark goal is that you want to aim for between 10 to 15 active clients. Now, lots and lots of different business consultants say this. They have different reasons for doing this. A lot of it comes back to revenue and allocation. I'm going to say it because I actually broke this down from a project management perspective, and there's logic here. So this would mean that throughout the year, you're not working with any more than 10 to 15 active clients. Folks that don't do this, they might be thinking, well, if we're really large, maybe we can scale up. And that's true. If you're like part of, say your company is very large, but you have separate offices and you sort of have your own little hubs where you do all the work and the work kind of stays localized, you can usually add all of those up. You're not going to have the same harm issue, but I'm going to talk about what happens in just a hot second. So what the actual reality is more like this. This is what I commonly see folks say. I'm curious, just with a show of hands, how many of you folks who are in client services here are more on the upper range of the 20 to 45? Okay, so I'm seeing some hands, some nods here. Okay, some folks that are closer to the healthy mark. So this is just food for thought because, again, when you come back to project management logic, all projects take a minimum amount of time to set up, right? There is not a heck of a lot of things that you can do to automate the the information transfer that comes from your stakeholders, the conversations that you need to have when you're actually setting up your project management software or trying to organize the initial like upfront scope of your project. It's the scope you have before you actually know the scope, right? So if you had 20 to 45 different projects, your PM, or if you're the PM, and your team is going to be spread extremely thin because they're still going to have to cover that when they should be just covering something like that. Okay, so that's a really important tidbit. One of the reasons that this is really valuable and really important information is because it leads to delays, distractions, and project drag. And so, yeah, you folks are like, yeah, okay, fine, but we're on budget. It's all right. No, it's not all right. What happens is if you are an organization that whether or not you have a product, whether or not you have a service, or you're an internal org that's providing a service and you're the part of a department, when you don't launch, you create a problem because regardless of what your organization does, money flows through it, correct? So if money's flowing through it and you have a 3-month project that suddenly takes 6 months, the amount of time that goes by makes it very difficult for you to achieve the goals that you have. And in some cases for client service, this directly translates to billable work. And this means that you are no longer above the, well, maybe you're sitting below your expense line when you were above your expense line. Now you need to plug it with projects, right? Or if you're an internal company, this means that you're actually, you're sort of distancing yourself from this line. But now what we're talking about is a loss of return on investment. You're not getting that money that you need to be getting to actually do the next thing that allows you to launch faster in the future, right? So this is one thing that we find is super overlooked. People are like, we're on budget, it's fine. It's not fine. So let's actually do a little calculation here. The goal here, this is from a company called Summit CPA. They're an accounting firm. They specifically deal in digital. They're very, very smart folks. They have a great book called Digital Dollars and Cents. If anyone is interested in checking this out, they recommend no more than 10% project drag. 10% of your timeline would be over. So let's see, if you had a 10-day timeline, you're only over by 1 day. Now, team, just a little highlight here. Project overages. The reality is that 53% of projects are 189% over. That is real bad, real bad. And if you think about this in terms of even infrastructure projects, or you think about this in terms of, I don't know, healthcare projects or government projects, it extends into all of those. A lot of the projects that we think we can do in a shorter period of time, we can't. And so this, you can imagine, is what happens, right? This is a big deal. So just by a show of hands, who would be comfortable saying, if your projects, let's do this one first, sit under 10% of project drag on a regular basis? I love that. People are laughing. That's great. I know, right? How many of you folks are brave enough to put up your hands if your projects happen to be going over by 200%? So more than double. Okay, it happens. It happens. There's no shame. This is a safe space. That's why we're here together. We're doing this. We're going to work through it. We've got some important stuff ahead. Here's an interesting one. A lot of projects drag by between 20 to 400%, and 85 projects fit into that category. So you might be just up here in terms of project overages, but you might actually be down here in terms of project drag. So that's a lot more in terms of the amount that you're going to be risking. So one other final tidbit here. 17% of all large IT projects are called black swans, and black swans threaten the existence of the company. That is the over 200 to 400% budget overrun. So if you were hitting that, you had like a 1-month project and it's taken you 4 months or going over by that amount, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. That's okay, we can help. So one other thing to think about here, and this will be great, Shay, because after this, we're gonna do a little poll. We're gonna look at how many active projects a PM should be managing. This one's my favorite. This is your goal, team. You should be aiming for between 3 to 5. There is science behind this. I am so excited to share this with you. Do you wanna know what the actual is from our research? Yeah, you do. You wanna know, right? You wanna know, okay. It's 6. when we did our pattern report study, and this was again owners saying how many projects does your PM run, they reported 6 active projects. Now I have a feeling if I tried to gather, and I did try to gather larger data sources on this. What we found was that there was actually a range of between 4 to 12 to 16 projects, right? There is a reason why we say 3 to 5 active projects. And this is what it is right here. Okay, so imagine your week. Imagine that you only work Monday to Friday, and you only work a rough chunk in the morning and a rough chunk in the afternoon. You say that those chunks might be 3, maybe 4 hours, but realistically they're 3 hours. And that if we're using our proper project management data that we just mentioned up here with project management budget allocation, 20 to 30%, I did the low side for this calculation, then that means that if we basically assign 20% of your project to each part of the week, you would have room for 3 projects. And did you know, you lose approximately 40% of your time to distraction, to task switching. So if you're moving between task A or project A and project B, you are definitely going to be distracted between all those projects. So that doesn't mean Thursday and Friday are a write-off. I can't really embed all this, but basically there is literal science to show you that you can run 3 to 5 projects. If these projects would be smaller, you could interchange some of these blocks, but that is your science, folks. That is why you need to go back to your teams and say, hey, there's science behind this, and this is really, really important. So now we're going to do an official poll, and I actually want to find out a little bit more about how you allocate your projects. So if I could get, I'm going to share my screen over here, not this one. I'm going to share it here. We are going to do a poll, and I think Shay, do you have this sent out to everybody?
Yeah, you bet.
All right, team. Okay, right on. So keep an eye on the chat. You are going to go and fill in how many projects are you actively working on right now? And this is official. I feel like I didn't hear any audible tears, but I feel like you folks are going to say more than 3 to 5. I just feel like that might happen. And that's because there's a dynamic that I can't wait to get into in terms of why that happens. All right, y'all, let me know if you need any more time. Maybe quick hands up if you do. Okay, looks like we're ready to show the results. So I'm going to hit refresh, but I can't remember how we show the results.
Do you have the link up, Rach?
I can pull.
I think you need to vote to be able to see the results.
Oh, I need to vote. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do this one. Okay. So, all right. So folks said that most people, 29% were reporting that they were managing 4 projects. 21% were saying 2 projects, 18% 5, 3, 14% were saying 3 projects. Then there's a lump that's managing 7 to 10. Then there's a lump that is 4% managing 6 projects. A few poor folks are managing 11 to 15. And I'm going to take the people out that are managing more than 15 for a beer. So you have my sympathies. So this is a big deal, right? Because it's not sustainable. We absolutely can't do this. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about how we deal with this towards the end, but let's just keep going and let's see how this ties back to now process health. All right, so process health is obviously a big topic. It extends out beyond just the way that you're managing your projects to how your projects hook into operations, sales, into even just like research capacity, testing capacity. If you have creative disciplines, how those all hook together, the financials and how your company's actually working, all these pieces need to fit together. And so we're trying to zoom out a bit. Even if your title is project manager or you carry another another hat. Maybe you're an owner, maybe you're in a director role, a management role, or some other kind of role. It is so, so important for you to be able to connect the little with the big. And when I say little, what I mean is the in the weeds stuff with the stuff that's above the weeds. When you look above and you can see what's on the horizon, there is a small percentage of project leads, I'll call them leads because that kind of fits all of those titles, that can do both. But it is such an amazing quality to be able to zoom out when you need to zoom out, but then zoom back in when you need to zoom in. So what we're going to talk about, first of all, I was like shocked, but then not shocked at all. Productivity rates. So here's the reality, folks. They did a study through the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2018. On average, folks were spending approximately 8.88 hours at the office. Now I'm thinking, obviously this is pre-COVID, so it's hard to say what the current timing is. But of that time, they said that only 2.53 hours were productive hours. 2.53 hours. Do a gut check on your own day. Do any of you folks get stuck in unproductive time? This includes reading news websites, checking social media, discussing non-work related things with coworkers, searching for jobs, smoke breaks, calls to partners, hot drinks, texting, eating snacks, and making food in the office. It's totally okay if you're feeling unproductive, by the way, because COVID, right? I don't have to say it. If you're feeling like you just barely got out of bed today, you're doing a pretty terrific job in my view. So I'm curious, just with a show of hands, how many of you folks would consider your number for productivity higher than 2.53 hours per day? Just go give me a wave or give me like a little emoji. You can do that with your camera off. Okay, cool. Anyone like brave enough to be like, yeah, it's less than that? I mean, if you're just like feeling super done and crispy, then that's okay. That is okay. Like I said, if you got out of bed today, check mark, done. You don't need to worry about it. Right on. So yeah, so of course, we have a weird relationship with productivity. There's the cult of productivity, the idea that, you're born to just work, and everything you should do in your life is about really optimizing your entire workflow and making sure that everything you do is all about getting that work done. And I'm sorry, I'm going to call bullshit. That's a lot of bullshit, because we get this much time that we're aware of. We work because this is the system that we came up with as human beings. And we're like, obviously labor, that's how we have to do this. There's no other way to do it. We didn't invent something new. And now we're kind of experiencing the consequences of that. I don't know if you all know this, but apparently global productivity has absolutely flatlined, even though humans are more productive. The outputs have not been able to actually meet, like in terms of quality and what we're actually talking about, the reality of our situation. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are putting more hours in than we are getting out, right? So think about how much of this work is busy work. How much of this work is you sitting there duplicating the notes that you just took in the kickoff meeting and rewriting them somewhere else? How much time is spent listening to a stakeholder that you probably don't even need to be listening to because they shouldn't be there in the first place, or trying to loop in the one that isn't involved because they couldn't show up to the meeting? We spend so much of our time trying to wrangle and cat herd and make sure that everybody's okay. And we seldom stop to just, again, kind of pull the clouds down and look above them and look at how much of my job is bullshit. And I really, really want you to be thinking about that, because your life is short, right? We don't know how much time we get. And it is really, really important for us to be able to put that care and love into the things that really do matter. I'm not calling your job bullshit. What I'm saying is that a lot of the work that we do is busy work. And so you really have to pare it back and ask yourself what's important. So in terms of a benchmark, it's really tough to be like, this is good or this is bad. It simply is what it is. Now, I looked up at the World Economic Forum. They did a study and they wanted to see in China, when they gave people a 4-day work week, what would happen. And so in that time, and I forget how long the study was conducted for, I want to say it was 3 to 6 months, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me. I have the resource somewhere. The productivity rates of folks went up by 13%. So when people work less, they work better. They get more things done that are more valuable. Except they thought, well, maybe this would apply to COVID. And the truth is it doesn't, because laundry, obviously, and all of the other chores and other household things that you need to do, maybe looking after your parents or your kids or your pets. Everyone got a COVID puppy, right? We all have that. Okay. So making sure that, we're actually dealing with the stuff that we normally try to deal with in the periphery of our minds is now center. And it's not that we should be deprioritizing that, in my opinion. I think there should be a new way of looking at the balance between what is work and what is, quote, not work. We should have a new way of looking at and establishing how we care for our families and look after our kids, so that work isn't like, hey, why is that baby on your lap during this meeting? Because that's my baby. I don't have a baby, but if I had a baby, I'd say that, right? This is really important stuff. Interestingly enough, when we surveyed from our own research, the digital companies that we asked, they said that between Q2 and Q3, 33% were actually reporting an increase in productivity. Just by a show of hands, are you folks experiencing the wall? Or are you experiencing the sort of like arch of, I still feel like there's more to be done and I'm not in traffic, and if I could just get this email sent, everything would be better? So by a show of hands, I want to see, has your productivity rates gone up since COVID? Okay, so there is like a split here, right? Because I am starting to notice this, and I wonder if you folks are feeling this too. There is a 6-month COVID burnout. It's like a death march. I don't know what happened. It just slipped in. It was almost like when the fires on the West Coast started. So Texans, you probably are like, sucks to be you. It was bad. It was like the worst air quality in the entire world was in our city. And we're not even in the city where the fire was. And so I don't know about you, but we all collectively just kind of like, everyone got really quiet and really sad. And like all the plans we made that were like, let's sit in the park and drink a beer together, we're like, gone. So it's okay if you're feeling this way. It is okay for you to feel burnt out and tired and not productive. I think I've kind of said that already, but just in case you didn't hear it and you need to hear it again, you're great. You're freaking great. So don't worry about it, okay? I'm going to get into a little bit around remote work now. I found that, I didn't find this. This was my partner, Travis. Thanks, Trav. I appreciate you. My partner, Travis, found this great little thing by Chris Hurd, and he is the founder of a company called, I just forgot the name of the company. First Base HQ. So he just pulled some stats. He pulled 1,000 different companies over the last 6 months about their plans to go remote from now on. And here's what I'm just pulling a couple things from this thread. He said that headquarters are finished. Companies will cut their commercial office space by 40 to 60%. This will allow every worker to work from home 2 to 4 days a week and come into the office 1 to 2 days a week. 1,000 companies, and that's the spread. Fully distributed, approximately 30 of these companies that we talked to are getting rid of the office entirely and going remote first. Companies doing this have seen their workers decentralize rapidly, leaving expensive cities to be closer to family. So people are like, give me my green patio space. I don't want to be in the city anymore. All of you who live in Vancouver, I don't know if anyone's experiencing this in Austin, it is emptying out downtown. I look down the street, every restaurant that hasn't closed is ready to close, and every apartment building has a for sale sign in the window. People are waving from the balconies being like, buy this apartment. And reality is nobody's buying apartments in Vancouver. They're renting them because they're millions of dollars. So anyways, all my point is that we're all emptying out into the suburbs. Chris also said that personal injuries are exploding. Companies have not moved quickly enough to prevent them, and back, neck, and repetitive strain injuries are becoming a huge problem. Everybody just kind of like check your posture right now. Just like, are you doing okay? How's that neck, right? This is real. This is your life, and then your life in a chair, and then like your life in your bed, working from your bed, right? You got to definitely look after your body, and your organization should be absolutely doing the things it needs to do to look after you. So you should be squeaky about that as a team to make sure that you're being looked after. This will be remedied quickly by providing better ergonomic equipment. Imagine that. Did y'all get a stipend for your office equipment because if you weren't working from home, that is your company. If you're a full-time worker, that is on your company to be able to support you with that. And larger laptop screens, wink, wink. Okay. So let's go into remote work. So pre-pandemic, this is pulling from Pattern Report again, which I will be sharing with you momentarily after this talk. So we pulled the digital service companies, and we found that before the pandemic, only about a quarter of people were working fully or half remote. So half remote was like a hybrid. They'd be half there and half at home, half at the office, half elsewhere. But here's what's interesting now. Reality is that during the pandemic, so that week or two when everybody was like, what's happening? 93% of the workforce went home. So can you imagine, like, just imagine that. I think they said that like the earth got quieter, the vibrations went down on the earth. Like the whales were singing louder that week because everyone was like, oh, I can hear myself thinking. Weird stuff. Anyways, not relevant. 54% plan to stay remote after the pandemic from our results. So comparing that to this little guy here. So Chris said that 30% of the companies that they were polling said that they would be going fully remote. We were specifically digital client services, right? So it makes sense. A lot of folks might have already been remote starting. And part of it too is that there is an embracing of geographic talent pools that aren't limited to localized pools, right? And like looking at using digital software and tools that are online. A lot of other companies are still just kind of like, whoa, getting used to that, because there was the expectation that you had to work from the office, and there was the expectation that you would pop by somebody's desk to ask them how they're doing. So that's really, really changing. And here's the thing. Normally, I would say remote work isn't a benchmark. Like, so what? Big deal. Maybe you're thinking that right now, like, Rachel, she's full of it. What is she talking about? Here's the thing about this. Here's the life cycle of a company. We're not going to go into all the details here, but you notice the line goes up, line goes down. In the future, if not now, I'm going to say now because I called it on LinkedIn, I swear I did. I think that companies from now on who are not embracing at least a hybrid approach to labor, where they're allowing people to work from home, they are going to go the way of the dodo. They are not going to be able to secure the talent pool that they need. They are not going to be able to afford to pay people what they need to survive, to live in the house with the patio. They are not going to be able to compete. You can put that in your hat and take that back to your company. Rachel said, louder than 10 said, if we're not actually embracing a hybrid approach, then we are potentially losing our talent pool. And this is something that is going to hurt us as a company for the rest of our future. So I'm curious, team, I'm just going to do an informal poll on this. For remote work, how many of you folks think that you will stay remote, either half on, half off, or fully remote? So this would be, I'm just not asking if you're staying in the office. How many of you folks are going to continue to be remote or half remote? Whoa, that's definitely, yeah, that's pretty much right in line. I don't know about the folks that are cooking dinner, but that's great. Wow, yeah, so it's gonna rapidly change. The side effect of this, guys, I don't know. Like, it's not even in my slides, but I got to tell you, I am super concerned that we're taking a very social species and we are essentially making ourselves antisocial. And I don't know what the long-term impact of that is going to be. We're project managers, for heaven's sakes, project leads. How are we going to fare as antisocials, right? Like, I don't know. Some of us are introverts, is fine. But yeah, that's a big thing to be considering. I'm going to come back to this one. I think this is a really valuable benchmark. So this will differ depending on who you talk to, but there is definitely some strong resources to suggest that when you are looking at how many PMs per teammates, and again, this I'm going to just stick to project, not product management, because there's a little bit of a different setup for your teams, right? Where product, you might have your product manager, scrum master, and then you might have a series of designers and engineers. But generally speaking, if we're talking about an internal team that's creative or doing software or even doing marketing, you usually want to have a 1 PM for every 5 to 7 people in that they're working with. So I'm thinking of like implementation. There are people that are doing the work. And there is another scientific reason for this. I'm going to come back to it in a second, but just curious, how many of you folks are are at that level. You basically like manage the projects for 5 to 7 people on your team. Show of hands. Okay, some people, some folks. So here's what I actually see more often is closer to 1 to 10. So for every PM, there's 10 teammates. Now, some of you folks might be thinking like, what's the problem? You can have a team of 10 working and you can run projects for a team of 10, right? Yeah, okay, you can. But did you know it really starts to thin out your dedicated team time. So if you are working with team 1 who's running 3 projects and team 2 who's running 3 projects, you're now running 6 projects. And we said that 6 is putting you over your capacity because you might have a team that is going to be able to handle that. But imagine how much more functional and useful you'd be if you were just dedicated to that one project. Now, I didn't include this, but this is another one for you to tuck into your hats for later. If you are not including project management time, if you're client facing, as a billable item, do that. It is absolutely imperative for you to include it in your budget because if you don't do it, the project will fail. So you need it. So you need to bake in that 20%. So anyone that comes back and is like, we can't afford that, you're gonna have to just manage double the size of the team size. You're just gonna have to go back and we're gonna have a conversation and we're gonna tell those folks, this is how it's gotta be. Actually, we're gonna use a way more like get a buy-in, build a business case. We're gonna do a bunch of that, but still sounds good when you say it. So how many of you folks are kind of more in that range? Anyone here? Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm gonna go with that's pretty great. All right, so it is poll time. So I have to go in and do my second poll here. Okay, so this is how many PMs do you have compared to other teammates in your organization? So go into your chat window, click the poll, go in and just say, how many do you have compared to the other teammates? Or so 1 PM per how many teammates? I'm not doing Jeopardy music. I mean, I could. My voice is just, it's like a COVID voice. Have you ever got COVID voice where you just like, goes really deep and husky, but not in a good way. And you're like, oh, it kind of hurts. Yeah, I get that sometimes. Okay, I'm gonna give you 10 or 15 seconds. I almost started the Jeopardy music. Stop it. Okay, I'm just gonna, what is I actually have to answer the question here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this one. Okay, so send and let's see what these results are. All right, okay, so this is promising. So folks have, based on the polls, it looks like most of you, about 52%, are working with 5 or less teammates. About 16% have 6. And then we start to see diminishing diminishing numbers over here. So some of you have 6 teammates, that's 16%. Some of you folks are 10, that's 12%. Some of you have 7 teammates, that's 8%. Some of you had 12 teammates, 8%, 8 teammates, 4%. So we're getting down to again, I'm going to take you all for beers, or I'll just ship them to you. Just tell me who you are and I will send that to you. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting spread, and it's good to see that you folks are actually doing pretty okay in that department. That's great. Okay, so coming back to poll project health. So now that we've looked at both project health and we zoomed out a little bit more to process health, of course, we're going to end it with people, right? People are super, super important. In fact, I would go as far as to say, if you don't have people, you don't have a business. Words of wisdom from Rachel today. No, but seriously, right? If you don't have folks working at your company who are happy, who are not overworked, who are feeling supported, I'm totally going to get the dates wrong on this, but my partner Trav, he was sharing this really interesting. It was like a summary of business management practices over history and how it used to be very bureaucratic. Like not that long ago, you didn't go in to work and be like, I have a sore throat, I have COVID voice, or I shouldn't joke. I'm sorry, that's not right. You wouldn't joke and you wouldn't say like, oh, like my family's not doing well, or I'm feeling kind of run down, or like I legitimately have mental health concerns that I'm looking after, you would not be able to go into the office and do that because there would be no psychological safety. It would not be even acknowledged. And it would be something more like, get your work done. Did you get your work done? Because if you didn't, then what are you talking? Why are we standing here? Things have changed a lot. And as you can imagine, right, there's a lot in the news about like, how are Gen Zs adjusting to the workforce? And then how are the baby boomers handling it all? Okay. So we have different value systems at work and we're trying to adjust to what those things are going to be. And so we have to look at this from a very holistic perspective. So I'm going to go into a couple pieces that I think are kind of reflective of the benchmarks that are going to be useful to you all. And then we're going to have some time to talk about tips and do a little exercise together. Just checking time. I think I'm okay so far. Okay, so first of all, I pulled up some salary information. My image alpha edit didn't work so great. Sorry that this is maybe not perfectly clear, but I went to Glassdoor and I just happened to pull up some Vancouver-based salaries and some Austin, Texas-based salaries. Now, keep in mind, there is definitely a difference for the currency. And so, I mean, I think, what are we at, like 50% of the US dollar? Just kidding, I'm Canadian. But basically project management salaries right now are running at an average pay of around 84K. Whereas in Austin right now, it's an average of 64K and it says 3% below the national average. So if y'all are at this rate, you should be asking for a 3% raise. That's just my opinion. But interestingly enough, right, we have to kind of get an idea, like what is a baseline here? Well, I've heard that, you know, junior PMs can start anywhere from 50 to 64K, mid-levels are 65K to 80K, and seniors are 81 up, anywhere into the six digits. So this is kind of like a loose benchmark to kind of look at in terms of ranges. So bottom would be 50, high would be six figures. I'm curious, you don't have to tell me what your salary is. Does this data look like feasible to you? Is it surprising to anybody that the Vancouver-based salary is higher? It was actually to me, because I know that Vancouver pays its workers 30% less than other places in Canada and 50% lower than America. That's what I don't know if you all knew that. I found this out. I was like, wow, this is super, super surprising. So this is something to just think about in terms of how healthy are you in your companies. Now, the next thing I want to draw your attention to is turnover. This is an interesting one. You might not have actually thought about this. It's really, really important because, well, for starters, if you know how many people are leaving in a given year, you know if you're retaining them. It costs approximately 150% of a person's salary. Sorry, I lied. 150% of a senior person's salary to replace them, and approximately 40% of a mid-level or junior salary to replace them. And it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months to do so. So that means that if you are in a company that's turnover is higher than 10%, that means for every 10 people working at your company, one's leaving. That's not good. That's not good. Where are all your rates at in terms of turnover? Who here is under 10? Actually, I can't do that because that's part of our poll. Don't calculate that. We're going to do this formally. So let's find out what the tech industry is doing, shall we? The turnover rate in our technology industry, specific to the type of work that we all do, is approximately 13.2%. So that means that 13.2 people are leaving, right, for every 100 people. And that's a high number. That's something that we should absolutely be keeping an eye on, and we should be watching for certain types of behaviors. Now, when we come back to that, we'll actually look at what are these behaviors, because remember, productivity, you can't just measure like engagement through productivity. If you're working harder or working less hard, that's not an indicator that everything's peachy. You could be working harder because you're like, I can't bear the thought of doing the laundry, or I can't bear the thought of like having to talk to my mother-in-law, or whatever your thing is. I love my mother-in-law, but you might not. So this is something that you have to start thinking about it in terms of what does higher morale actually look like. When we get into this, we define this as people who feel like they have power in their roles. They have the ability to speak up and ask for things. They have the ability to influence the direction of the projects that they work on. They have the ability to say no to stakeholders who are actually tanking the project and resetting those boundaries so that you can basically run a healthier project overall, right? So this data is pretty shocking. This data was even more shocking. Fun fact, Amazon has 100% turnover. So that means that for every worker that comes in the door, a worker leaves. They basically just have a revolving door. And another fun fact, which I don't find funny, is that they now have little robotic devices on your wrist that track your every movement, so they know exactly how many boxes you put into the organizational bins. And if you slow down too much, they fire you for that. So this is, just so I'm clear, this is like willingness to leave. This is, I chose to leave. I don't know what this number is. I'm assuming it's willingness to leave, but I'm not sure. So yeah, not a good indicator of health, but that's their business model. So that's all I'm going to say. Another thing that is really valuable to be thinking about in terms of people is the stress factor. So I just did a little research, and there was a report that came out by America's State of Mind, and they did a report this year. I think it was like, don't quote me, May, June. And they were trying to find out, how folks were doing. And I had read that there was like a 33% uptick in anxiety and depression. And so previously in 2019, there was a decrease of 11%. Prescriptions for anxiety and depression had decreased 11%. That was great, right? Like that we're feeling good. Like we had big plans for 2020. Boom. Well, now it's up 38%. Like we're all just super stressed, and probably nobody's sleeping. Or if you are sleeping, you're dreaming about your cat being a spreadsheet or whatever the thing is that you folks think about, right? So this is a big deal. This would be something where you can't go ahead and use this metric at work and be like, all right, everybody, tell me what your prescription dosage is and let's talk about this. But there are other ways to have conversations about mental health at work. You can make space for having conversations about how people are holding up, how they're doing, what they need, how you can support them, right? If you're not having the conversations, I would say you could use that as a benchmark. Like, are you making space for those conversations, or are you not? Healthy companies are doing that and not demanding that people answer, because sometimes people are like, leave me alone, I'm tired and I just need to go to bed, versus, I feel like sharing where I'm at right now. But thinking about that is the broader range of health, right? This is a big deal. I read this and it was kind of like bittersweet, right? There was the whole idea of like, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what its job is, or that's not what it was meant for, right? But this one's even more beautiful. My boss said, just try to get the ship into the harbor, and it doesn't matter if they're banged up. That's fine. Like, this is kind of where we're all at right now. Just like, yeah, got a little nick on the left. Oh shoot, I forgot the boats. Is bow? Stern? Nope. Ports. Anyways, one of the boat sides. I'm not a sailor. I should be, but that's what you got to be thinking about. Just get the darn boat into the harbor. Don't worry about the rest. You can figure it out. So on that note, we're going to do another poll. I'm going to keep the energy going. You ready? You ready for this? I kind of gave it away earlier. You might have guessed which one we're going to do. We are going to talk about turnover rates. So team, if you haven't thought about this one, you have to actually do a bit of a calculation. You actually have to think about your total company size, or team size if you're like, I have no idea, there's thousands of us, either or. And then think about how many people left voluntarily this year. Like they weren't kicked out, they weren't downsized, nothing bad happened to them, they just left. And put that into the little pollster here. Let's see where we land. I'm going to give us about 10 more seconds. All right, ready? Let's see what happened. Okay, this is good. This is good. And some bad. Oh, it's adjusting. Okay. So about 48%, about half of the audience has less than 5% turnover. That's extremely, okay, wait. It can be extremely healthy But it can also mean that people are like, I'm not leaving right now. It's COVID. I'm staying put. And that's also a reasonable way to live life and do work right now, because job changes are very insecure right now. Employment's very precarious, and a lot of positions have changed and shifted. One of the things that I was noticing actually over the last 6 months is that project management hires have significantly decreased, but interestingly, people who are either junior or related fields like coordinators and that's increased for hiring. And people are like more willing to do training. They're more willing to invest the time and energy into making sure that the people that they have are going to be successful. And I didn't say this, but shoot, if I go back to my slides here, where's my little, where's that thing? My little, there we go, this little thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and say remote work. And if you are not prepared to train and invest in people who are actually already in your company, you're going to go the way of dodo companies, because you're increasingly going to have a talent gap. There's a 90% talent gap happening right now. So that means like, yeah, so basically for every person that is qualified, there's like 90 people who are not. That's not the right math. Don't quote me on that one. There's a lot of other people who are not qualified. And the issue is going to be, yeah, it was 10 to 90, that we aren't going to have the people to fit those roles. We have to invest, get them early on into training programs that start when they join, so that they can come straight out of high school or college, whatever that is right now, and get into this supportive framework. So that's just another, this is like my Nostradamus facts of the day. Okay, so 8 to 10% turnover, 23% of people said that they're around that normal range. So, okay, there's a few of you folks, 9%, that said you're hitting that 11 to 13% turnover. So you folks that are in this row and down, you've got to keep an eye on what's happening in your organizations, because this could be symbolic of some deeper systemic, people are moving, they're like, no, it wasn't there, somewhere else. You got to be keeping an eye out for things that are going to be impacting you at a broader level. These are things, we'll kind of dive into this in a hot minute here, but just looking at like, do you have toxicity in the actual core of the company, the way that it's run? Is it possible for leadership and for implementation teams to coalesce, to come together and collaborate? You actually, most people usually know the answer, even if they're like, it's going to be fine, everything's fine. They already know the answer. And that's a heartbreaker for me, because I've pushed and fought for that one, I tell you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to where we landed here. So I just got to find my place real quick. Oh yeah, okay, so there we were. So we did pull time. So team, I'm gonna do a couple tips. I'm not gonna give away everything, but there's just a few big takeaways here that I think are really, really important for you all. And then we're gonna get you to do a little bit of work yourselves. So first and foremost, when we're talking about things to do, you kind of have a couple options. So you can push for change. You can recalibrate and look at what your systems are doing already. And then if things are not working out, you can walk away, right? Granted, walk away when it makes sense. Don't just be like, I'm out of here, flip a table and then leave. But this is basically what I'm going to say here. If your calendar looks like this, I don't know if this is like, if it's like a whole bunch of Skittles and you're like, yeah, that sounds like my day, my week, then that's probably a good indicator that you can push for change, because this should not be your norm, even as a project leader. It doesn't have to be. I know that when you're checking email, this little thing here is actually, 6 different projects. I know that, but you can still look at effective time blocking and time management that is going to allow you to be a little bit more certain about where that time is going, so that people who are on project A are not going to be bothering you on Monday, right? Or people on project C know that deep focus work happens on Thursdays. And so that's the difference, right, between this gross feeling that a lot of us, and let's be honest, this PM is like midnight, right? Like people are working super long hours, and this just is not sustainable. We can design and invent a new way of working together. So that's one of the indicators right there. If you're like, when do we push for change? When this calendar looks bad. Another thing is when people are sad, but still hopeful. So again, it is not completely possible to decouple people's sadness from work, because we don't know if the sadness is work related or if the sadness is just this general. I mean, let's not forget that we're not just dealing with a pandemic, we're also dealing with massive civil rights movements all over the world, right? We are standing up for our Black folks, we are standing up for communities and saying no more bullshit. And so there is a weight and an oppression that is hitting people in all kinds of ways, and it's not just this year, it's been every year, right? So all of this is like a wave that has just been toppling. But I want to give you a seed of hope in this, because that is honestly like, that's what we need to get up in the morning. In the midst of the darkest times of history, you know, other times where like the Spanish flu and the plague and other times where folks have been going through awful times, it also yields this almost an enlightenment that comes afterwards. And it's a beautiful time where communities bond together and they start looking at systems and thinking, this is not a sustainable system. This is not working for most of us. I'm going to throw in just a tiny little hint of what this means to us at Louder Than 10 for you all. You're getting a little bit of the secret iceberg. I don't regularly talk about this, but I feel like we've kind of been through some stuff together already. Democracy at work is not just about being able to push back and say, you don't want to work with a client that you don't like. Democracy at work is, this is the system that we've decided as humans is the system we put everybody through. If you're anybody and you need to make a living, you're working. So when we talk about democracy at work, what we're talking about is taking the power back from a very, very small group of people who have traditionally always held that power, and redistributing that power in a fashion that allows us to not just do great work, but to live very, very healthy, sustainable lives. Because if you can't pay your rent and you can't afford groceries and you're working 40 to 60 hours a week, that is not a job, that's a sentence. And I'm going to get off my pulpit now because I care a lot and it's something that's really, really important to us. So what you want to do is, if folks are still, in this place where they are hopeful, you can start to recalibrate, right? There are things that you can do. And I'm not going to get into the weeds in this. There's a lot more I can teach you, but let's just start with the surface stuff and we'll let you do a little bit of work. First thing is, obviously, we got to stop the bleeding, right? Okay, so just remember that like all of this stuff, this is a symptom. This is not the problem, it's a symptom of the problem. Usually when we look at symptoms in these systems occur after the initial source. So like it's like a Pareto principle. So you have this 80-20 rule, right? So if you look at a project lifecycle, I'm going to go ahead and say that I think that 80% of the problems that happen on the project can be solved within the first 20% of the project. And that is usually because you have the right people at the table, you're having the right conversations and asking the right questions, you're pushing back against, like, let's just not make stupid things anymore. Let's not make things that are going to have long-term, not just project consequences and like company cons. I'm talking about like building apps that are causing genocide. Maybe we should stop doing that, right? And I'm going to say too, I'm not going to put it on you as an individual to stop and solve this problem, because we are existing in the system together and the system has been designed that way on purpose. So to put it on you is to basically say it's your fault, you got to change it. It's not what I'm saying. Collectively, we can do a lot, but within the system that you're given, if you look at the first 20%, that's when that project comes in. If you're in, say, working in a client services, it's those conversations between PM and sales. It's the handover processes between all of the phases that really get you, not the actual, not the phases so much themselves, but when you hand it back to a client, when you hand it to your product manager, when you are handing design to development, when you're doing testing, it's the pivots, right? There is, in systems theory, there are leverage points in the system. And by default, as humans, for whatever reason, we know where they are. We know where they are. But here's the weird part. According to, I'm going to quote a book in just a minute, but at Fifth Discipline, fantastic book, there is this thing that we do where we put the pressure in the wrong direction. We're like, I know where the problem is. And then we go in and we're like, ha, see? And it was like, great. wrong direction, buddy. So we actually do that inherently. And so that's a real gut check to start asking yourself, instead of trying to make our PMs and teams work faster, we have to slow the F down. We have to pause and we have to recalibrate, and we have to ask ourselves, where should we be putting our energy, right? Because to stop the bleeding, we actually have to be getting better alignment between sales and PM, or better alignment between product managers and scrum masters. That's what needs to happen. Slow down, right? You probably also want to be able to find your allies. In the Louder Than 10 program, we talk a lot about ally building. This isn't like, ooh, somebody to gossip with in the back channels. What I'm talking about when I say allies are people who are going to be able to be sounding boards for new ideas that you don't quite feel maybe open enough to tell the entire team yet. These are people who will help vet your growth path. These are people who will go to bat for you when you're like, hey, this is broken. Can we change this together? So all of this stuff is super vital to making sure that people are feeling good. What else did I want to say about that? Oh, most people want things to feel better. So there will be fence sitters, but don't worry so much about the fence sitters, because they're going to come along with you once you get consensus. That's like a change management principle, right? So basically what you're trying to do is work on the ones who have the biggest resistance and get the buy-in because they can actually tank the project. And then of course, the next thing that you want to do is you want to go lo-fi. So basically here, when you're doing system redesign, start analog, like investigate the system. Start with like a work breakdown if you need to, or some sort of process diagram that maps out all the points. You will inherently know which points are broken, but then you're going to be like, oh, let's fix it here by doing that. No, do the opposite thing that you think you should do. And that's probably going to fix it. So in systems theory, to create better flow, you have to remove the thing that is blocking you from doing what you are supposed to do. The barrier has to be removed. That's just a little systems principle for you. If you folks want to know more about what that looks like, I definitely recommend these two books. Sorry about that. I recommend The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, Systems Theory for the Learning Organization. It's very, very good. Don't worry, you'll get access to this information. And I would also recommend this book called Systemology, and I'm going to do a little shout out to America. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I read it cover to cover in a night. David Jennings, and it's this really brilliant little book on defining, assigning, extracting, organizing, integrating, scaling, and optimizing your business processes. It is super helpful, and it's like, oh yeah, a lot of the stuff that's baked into collaborating effectively together is in this book. So if you want to know what that looks like, check it out. And then I'll just finish up here real quick. So I have only got a couple pieces, then we're going to do a little exercise. And if there's any time left over, we'll leave some Q&A. So inject some energy into your process. Basically, if you do the same thing more than once, it doesn't go anywhere, right? It's not like it's not like you're solving the right problem. You're trying to solve the wrong problem the wrong way. So make it clear to everybody around you that things are not feeling good, and that it's like a team effort to fix. So I recommend, here's one little exercise you can run. There's lots more. If you folks are like, okay, we've mapped out our process map together, and we kind of know like generally where the pieces are and what's broken. Take a brainstorm, and for every person that's part of the brainstorm, put like different disciplines on the team. So we might have like a designer, developer, you might have a product or project manager, maybe an executive, and get all those folks to think of, in 10 minutes, what are as many ways as you can think of to improve that part of the system from your perspective, from your area of expertise. Because you will find that there is beauty in the knowledge that folks actually have. So absolutely make some time to do that. And like I said, think about reducing your capacity or pausing instead of speeding up. Honestly, just stop and be like, okay, team, we're running an overdrive right now. It's not working. we need to take a beat. So next Friday, we're going to book out the afternoon. Yes, I know we're going to have to move projects. Yes, I know we're going to have canceled calls with stakeholders. We're going to have to let them know. We can tell them that it's because we're looking at making sure that we're running a very sustainable organization so that it'll come back to them. And what we're going to do is we're going to sit down, we are going to map out this process together, and we're going to spend regular time learning together, because there is nothing more energizing than feeling like your voice matters, that your ideas matter, and that you matter, and that the things that you're contributing are going to help your organization get stronger. My last point is when to walk away. If nobody is treating you well or treating anyone well, if nobody is listening, if nobody cares, and if your organization is awful, here's my advice to you. We're talking not just hopelessness, we're talking about misery and toxicity in the environment, right? This is like breakdowns between leadership and staff. So maybe an inability to be vulnerable, which is sometimes fixable. There are things you can do to increase vulnerability that we teach. But a lot of the time, if management is not interested in your opinions, or they can't see other ways to do things, I used to believe, it's the grown-up me, I think now. I'm not going to say I'm jaded, but I used to believe that if you could just get everybody on the team organized and all the ideas are coming from the team, and you can make massive changes, right? You can move mountains. But what I realized by running this apprenticeship program is that if you do not have the buy-in from the leaders that make the decisions and cut the checks, you'll have short-term change. Yep. And the moment you leave or someone else leaves, and before you know it, the turnover rate has left it so that you've got less people who are familiar with the process than when you started, that change will revert right back to where it started. I have seen it happen, and it breaks my heart. In fact, I'm almost like ready to make a page on our site about don't put a PM through if you cannot believe in them. We cannot fix PMs because they're not broken. It's your processes that are broken. So if you work for a terrible company and realize, I recognize this is a privileged position to even think about being able to leave for a better one. So I'm not asking you to like, you own this and you just get that resume worked out and do your thing. Not asking you to do that. All I'm saying is that consider using most of your energy to set up the place that you are better than when you found it. Do your best, but pull that energy of you giving every last ounce of yourself back into your own body. Shut that part of you down and encase it with a really nice, warm, soft shield. And then you put just a limited amount of energy into the things that you need to do to be able to get your work done. While you're putting that energy into yourself, that's where you're going to find space and time to think about what is your growth path? Where do you need to be? Because I'm telling you, there are a lot of good organizations out there that do deserve you. There's more than you think. Even though I know a lot of toxic companies out there, there are more than you think, and they would be happy to have you. So if that's something that you need support with, we can support you in the Vancity DPM channel. There's so many things around jobs and supporting one another. If you need resume support or anything like that, just like give a shout out. We'll be there for you. Okay. So I am doing a time check. I know I was hoping for a little bit more time. Can someone help me out just knowing how much more time we should spend on this exercise?
Yeah, Rach. So we are having way too much fun. So I think we will need to take the breakouts and do them within our own teams as you recommended. And
Yeah.
a lot of us probably have that verbiage and confidence after this event. So yeah, I know it would have been really exciting, but we will do them with our teams instead.
Yeah, so I'll just show you what I was going to do. And then that way you folks know exactly what's happening next. And I apologize. I meant for us to have a little bit more time to do this. So I'm going to turn this into a little template, folks. And what we have here is this will work with you and your team. So you basically choose a dot color and then write in what type of organization.
Rach, we can only see the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank
No,
you.
it's okay.
I forgot I wasn't. Okay, I'll switch my share. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Got excited. Okay, so you can see my screen? Great. So
Yeah.
what you're going to do, folks, is on the left-hand side, you're going to choose a dot. In this case, it was like write down the type of organization you are, but maybe you adapt this so that it's your role instead. And then you just place the dot where you think your organization sits in terms of project health, process health, and people health. Okay, so that's a really good gut check, because if you do something on your own first and then you bring it back as a team, you learn a lot more about where all the disparate ideas and voices are, right? About how you sit together. So once you're done that, that's an opportunity for you to go down here and then do like a mini breakout with your teams and just think about what steps can you take to improve the health of your projects, your process, and your people. And maybe you just use these sticky notes to actually flesh that out. And of course, I'll just remove the questions you want Rachel to deep dive into, because I think we have 5 minutes left for questions.
Yeah, I think we can do 1 or 2 max. It's 6:55. I think people in the States are, it's bedtime.
No problem. Do you all want to just do 5 minutes of open questions? And then if you folks can help me out just knowing who is asking, then I will take any questions you folks have.
Yeah, and again, this conversation will, continue on Slack, so don't feel like shortened in any way. And if you want, there was a question about big or small teams. Is that person around? Someone wants to speak up, please do so. Use the raise hands function.
Thanks, team. I'll do my very best to answer.
Yeah, no pressure. Best questions ever.
Vancouver people are hungry and Austin people are tired.
I know.
Also, it doesn't have to be a question per se, but if there was a specific area you wanted to touch on a bit more, there was a lot of things that we covered. So that might be another way to have a question or.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'll jump in and just do a quick shout out, not a question, but I think that this has been super awesome. I've really enjoyed, even though it's a little bit sometimes like talking about things like turnover and like realizing that you might have like too many projects, all of that stuff can be a little bit overwhelming. Like this was super awesome and energizing and really great to hear about. So thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, Tracy. I really appreciate it. I know, it's like project management is just one tiny part of this, right? And it's like we don't get into this. I don't think we all get into this just to manage projects. There's got to be some affinity that we have in loving people and loving ideas and really trying to bring those things together and just highlighting like, what does it look like to be in a safe and healthy environment? And especially when so many of us, I think we carry a lot of guilt about how we're supposed to be right now, right? How are we supposed to act? And we should be helping more and like getting our company to where it needs to be. But again, when we sort of said, where are your companies right now? Because where you are, plus or minus, probably is going to be where you will be unless you have a major change that's kind of up ahead. And there's ways to predict those trends, right? So what are you pushing harder for? Why are you pushing harder? When do you get to look after yourself? Yeah, what are you thinking, team?
I did find the question, and the question was about project size, whether large projects versus smaller, and also what it means to like plug into those larger, smaller projects within your overall team.
Okay.
This was around when we were talking about how many project loads people had.
Oh, for project load, and it's bigger projects versus smaller projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're right in that if you kind of take a look at larger projects, you're usually going to be running fewer larger projects, right? You by default, they take more of your energy. 20% PM time on a large project is significantly bigger than 20% on a 1 month project, right? But again, looking at that larger project number, I've seen, so there's folks like, I'll quote, so I know MetaLab as a company, they will commit to only running 2 projects per PM. And it's magic. Like they split their capacity 50-50. And some of those projects are anywhere from 6 months to a year. Some of them are longer. And it allows them to work directly with, I think they have like client partner managers. So the sort of AM/PM role, but it's a beautiful mix and it really works well for them. So I would say just you want to reduce it a little bit as the project increases in size.
Okay, thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Any other last questions? Anyone else have anything to share? I think we will start wrapping up otherwise.
I do have a question.
Right on.
Rachel, well, everything has been so amazing. I'm such a fan of yours. I basically wrote down all the quotes you were saying in the chat so people go and look at them. So I think my question is very process related. You kind of mentioned about like the system and about how to tackle and change things. And I constantly find myself in the organization as a operations manager, kind of bringing feedback to my top managers like, hey, we need to do this or change this. What's your advice on just giving feedback, especially to your top managers? Because I find myself sometimes in the position that I don't want to be seen as the only person that gives feedback, even though I am. So kind of
Yeah.
that question.
That's really great. And thanks so much, America. I really appreciate you. So what I can say is that you have to be able to have a conversation about the way you talk to each other before you have the conversation. I'm kind of stealing that from our past editor, Marshall. He's like, you got to talk about the way you talk to each other. And so it's like setting up in advance when do we give each other feedback? How do we give each other feedback? Are we all open to getting that feedback? And if you're not open to getting it, there are exercises that you can run. If anyone's familiar with the 5 dysfunctions of a team, it's like super old, but it's still so relevant, except for one thing where they were talking about like fax machines. I was like, oh yeah, but some healthcare companies still do that. But yeah, looking at moving up the pyramid of team function. So looking at like first vulnerability, you've got to be able to just be able to talk about your puppy at home or a childhood story, and getting to know your team on a level where you can be like, hey, human, you're cool, I'm cool. Now we can actually connect and we can see each other as humans first, which allows you to then get up to the next level, which is the conflict. And most of us are very like, we entered into this like very toxic positivity environment where we're like, everyone's just so nice and supportive all the time. And then if someone really does have something they want to say that's like, quote, negative feedback, they're like, well, how could I possibly? We're such a supportive environment. Conflict is healthy. It is healthy. Debate is healthy. And it's a way for your team to voice opinions. And we're not shooting the person down, we're shooting the idea down. So basically what I'm saying is read the book and also try to work up the pyramid of function so that you can get to a role where you're hitting accountability. So it's definitely going to support. In America, we can talk all about it in Slack.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, team.
All right. I'm getting very sad that this event is coming to an end, but at the same time, I'm hungry. Rich, do you have any other last comments before we move to close?
I just want to say thank you so much to all of you who came and showed up, especially given that you're exhausted. You're pulling so much weight for your team. And I know it's late for many of you and you're hungry. And it means a lot that you spent your time with us today. And I just want you to know, like, having been a part of the Digital PM meetup group, and I know Tracy's Kick-Ass PM group, these folks, like, we genuinely care about you. We're not just doing this as like a hurrah, like we will show up for you. We will be there for you. So you don't often get a place to drop your PM load, if you want to call that. You don't get a place to put down the stuff you carry. You're the one that before was like eating chips and crying in the bathroom, right? Because where did you go? So let us do that for you. Let us be that for you. And let's create the level of trust in there where we can have those kinds of conversations. I think that's a beautiful thing for us to try to strive for.
That is such a good wrap up, and why we love these events. There's an empowerment piece here and a learning piece here, and it all comes together in a community package. And it is a great segue into our next event, which we did talk about really briefly, about leadership. And it sounds like the theme here is that PMs have to be leaders in our workplace. Why get hired if you don't trust us? Like, don't hire me. And that's what that means. So the event itself is on November 18th, 5:30 p.m., same place, same time. Write it down, November 18th. We want to see you. We're going to have two very different perspectives, 2 different industries, 2 different levels of experience and backgrounds. asking those questions about what makes us human and how can we show up as leaders at work. It's been so great to see you all. I think we have been flooded with a lot of facts and percentages. My brain is in 3-4 slides ago trying to absorb that fact. So I am sure there's going to be some conversation afterwards on Slack. Anything else before we all say bye?
Just thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Tracy and Sarah and the Kick-Ass team for hanging out with us. Yeah, really appreciate it.
It's so good to see your faces, Raph and Tracy and Alvin and Joseph, like America. Just like, thank you so much for you folks showing up. And just again, thank you to you, Meetup crew. You're fantastic. I love you. So thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Have a great